Hi everyone, and welcome to the Book Refuge, and welcome to a little bit different of a tone video today. It might get a little bit ranty, it might get a little bit dramatic, but hey, you knew what you were getting into. So, a couple things. If you're new here, you'll know that I normally stay away from negativity here. Like, I rant sometimes when we're talking about Outlander or about certain situations, but in general, I'm a pretty happy reader. I'm a pretty happy person. I don't read books that are going to make me unhappy. I either DNF them right away, or I just by now kind of know which books I want to get into and which books I don't. So I've even changed up how I do my wrap-ups because I read so many books that are 4 or 5 stars. I am pretty liberal with my high stars for romance because I believe that a romance is promising me just a couple things. It's promising me a hot love story, and it's promising me a happily ever after. So if a book does that for me, no matter what trope it is, no matter what situation we're in, if I feel those two things, I'm usually giving a book either 4 or 5 star. That's just how I rate. Because if it's not going to be a 4 or 5 star, I usually ditch that book before we get to that point, and I don't worry about it. So what I wanted to do today is I have a list. I think there's just 10 or 12 of these where they were books that I finished and they just didn't work for me for whatever reason. Doesn't mean the book is bad quality. It means that it didn't click with me. And a few of these I have strong enough feelings about that it will get a little bit ranty, but a few of them I don't have much to say besides will be this just wasn't my thing. But in the effort of transparency, being honest about some books that I didn't like, also know that I am not trashing an author for this. That is not what I ever want my channel to be. I don't want people to associate me with tearing people down, because already if one of these people wrote a book, they're so much braver than I could possibly be, and it just isn't my place to trash them unless they blatantly are doing something dangerous with their book, or not, how do we say it, not representing something well, or being dangerous with how they tell a story. I don't really give a flying crap what their story is. It's just if it worked for me or if it didn't. So that's enough prefacing this. This video will already be a little bit long. So let's go ahead and dive into books that just didn't do it for me this year. So I'm going to pull up, I filmed this in front of my computer screen, and I'm pulling up everything to get started. So we're going to start back at the beginning of the year for me here, because these are all the ones that I didn't like this year, and that's not that many. Like I said, I have a pretty good love for everything. But let's go back. Here it is. So the first one I want to talk about is On the Plus Side by Tabitha Fargo. So I read this book for a prompt when I was doing Romanceopoly. I've since I check in with my Romanceopoly once in a while, but I read so many books and so many different tropes that I don't really need the prompts to do it, but I think Romanceopoly is awesome. I'm just not a dedicated enough person to it, which makes no sense. But anyway, the prompt was about reading a plus-size heroine. I don't actively search those books out, but when I find one, I find them, I usually have a great time. Like with any romance, I can pretty much roll with any trope, any setup, whatever. And I don't even really consider a plus-size heroine a trope. That's just, it's a body type. It's literally your life. So when it has to be considered a trope, that makes me laugh a little bit. But anyway, that's a different thing. So this book just took, okay, so how do we do this? The way that I like to see a plus size heroine in a book, and I'm fine if they have, some self-doubt. That's not my favorite if they don't love themselves, but I get it. I've dealt with those struggles as a plus size woman. I understand those self-hatred or self-doubt or self-dislike feelings, but that's not my favorite thing to read, because I've said this many times, I read to escape reality, and one of the things that's a fantasy as a plus size girl sometimes is to have the person who normally wouldn't look at you that way and see what you know is special about you brought to life, okay? And in this case, the hero of this book, and we're in his POV for part of it, actively thinks that he could not be with a fat woman. And it just made it almost unbearable. And also, this heroine like didn't stick up for herself in that way, because I've also read it before where a hero thinks that he couldn't be with a plus size heroine, and then he meets the girl who just like blows that out of the water and is like, you're a dick for thinking that, and I think I'm fabulous and you should be with me. And the thing is that this girl didn't. She just like took it and was in love with him and was almost begging him to be with her, and it takes him a very long time to figure it out. And so I think I only finished this because it was shorter, is how I was able to get through it, because I just don't get it. Like, I would not have put up with that. And so it's hard to read it when I'm reading for, you know, escapism, when I'm reading for fun, and then to come up against this heroine that I just, number one, I want to give her a hug and tell her it gets better, and that she's spending time with the wrong douchebag if he's making her feel this way. So that's where a lot of my issues with this came from, is that, like, this guy was an asshole, and his come to Jesus moment happens way too far into the book. And I don't think that this book is good if you are a plus size woman who struggles with it at all, because I think it would send you into a dark place. I don't emotionally struggle with my weight too often. For me, it's always been, you know, if you've been on this channel a while, I've went on a health journey. I've lost 70 pounds in the last 2 years. Like, I have made active changes to be healthier, but it was because, like, I love my body and I want it to be healthy. And so I made those choices for me. It wasn't out of any self-hate or not feeling good enough or not feeling loved. It was because I want to be alive. I want to be able to have kids. I want to be healthy for me. And so all of those things are in my head. And when you have a character that, like, she feels like she needs to live up to a person, I'm just like, nah. Like, I'm just like, no, get rid of him. So, didn't like that. Next, I want to talk about Dangerous Alliance. And this is by Jennieke Cohen, I think is how you say her name. Yeah. There's actually a few historical romances on this list, which isn't surprising because I read a lot of them, so there's going to be some that don't work. This is, and you'll actually see a trend with the historical romances that are on here. So there's some things that I appreciated about this book, and then there's some things that I really didn't. So first off, the tagline for this, it's literally called, like, an ostentatious romance. So they're telling you that we're going to be copying some Austen tropes. Number one, that's totally fine. Almost every romance that you see today is going to have some threads of it lead back to Pride and Prejudice or one of the Jane Austen books. Like, you just are, because they're the archetypes of our genre. Like, it's fine. However, this one is a historical romance, and the character in it is like a contemporary of Jane Austen, or like around the time. And it's also, this is a YA, and it is like a childhood friends, then enemies, then lovers. There is a murder plot going on. There is an abusive spouse going on, not hers, but her sister's. There is kidnapping. There is threats of rape. Like, it has all the romance tropes in one book, mixed with all the Jane Austen tropes, mixed with a slow burn that just drove me bananas. So it literally is all the things. So there was just way too much trying to happen in this book. As I will say about another book that's on this list, I think that it could be a good entry into historical romance for young readers. If you read this book and you want more, I would love to help you, so please reach out to me. But I feel like this was much more a mystery than the romance. And that is something that I see happen in YA historical romances, is I feel like the YA genre needs there to be other stuff going on. And, like, I don't need that. Like, I just don't. So I hope it's a good entry for some people. I've seen it with a few more like mainstream booktubers who read, you know, the main title historical romances that come out. This is definitely marketed to be mainstream, like I understand, but it just like, it didn't work for me. And I'm really sad about it because I wanted it to be just the best that historical romance had to offer, so it could be a segue this way. But instead, I feel like it's going to be a segue. Hey, did you read this and weren't fully satisfied? Let me show you something that will satisfy you. So hopefully it's a good thing either way, but it was a letdown to me. And it made me sad, guys. It made me sad. So the next one I want to talk about, let me move up my list. Here we go. The next one that just didn't quite do it for me was Hate to Want You by Alicia Rai. So I don't even know why. So this is the one where I don't have as much to say. There's just a few reasons why I didn't like it. Number one, the hero denies his feelings for too long in the book for me. This is kind of a Romeo and Juliet. There's mafia stuff going on. It's a, you know, this is a childhood, this is a second chance romance. They were already kind of like, this is literally enemies to lovers, but they were like lovers to enemies to lovers again. And there's just a really complicated thing between their families going on. But so for me, it was a slow burn when the people are already having sex. Does that make sense? These people already love each other so much, but because of their families, they're denying it. They meet up once a year to have sex and give themselves one night of forgetting about their past. And it just didn't work for me. And I'm sad because this is a diverse read. This is an Own Voices book. But I just couldn't get into it because the angst, even though it was warranted because there is legit beef between their families, the reason why these two have a problem just really frustrated me. And again, the hero holds on to not wanting this to happen for too long for me. I always like my heroes to be more invested than my heroines too. So that's a thing for me. And it just didn't work. So I don't have too much else to say about that. I know a lot of people love this. I kind of want to continue the series still because there's other couples in the Forbidden Hearts that I want to read. So I may still continue that series, but I'm not in any urgency because I didn't really care for it that much. All right, let's switch up. This was a romance I just read last month. Actually, the thing that prompted this video is, so those first 3 books, I read like one of those like every month. And so there was only like one I was really disappointed in. And then in the last month and the beginning of this month, I've read 8 of these books that I was disappointed in. So that's kind of why this video came about, is I've just been really disappointed in a few books lately. But I read Dirty for Me by Jackie Ashenden. And this was the first in the Motor City Royals. And this is about this like rich girl, and she goes to a self-defense class with her friend. And the self-defense teacher is this hottie hunk named Z. And he ends up taking her home afterwards, and they have sex in his car. And so it's like a one-night stand setup. But then because the sex is so good, they start meeting up more and more to have these like one-night stands. But she's about to get engaged to someone her parents want her to get engaged to. And it's just, everything was done halfway, is how I would describe this book. And I just didn't really connect with the characters. I feel like I like one-night stand stories. I think they can be really interesting. But I just didn't care about either of these characters. And so it was just kind of a meh for me. So that's why this one's a miss, is that it didn't give me any passionate feelings at all. So it's like a book can be a miss for me if it makes me passionately angry. Or it can be a miss because I'm just like not passionate at all. So I've seen this type of story done better. So there's that. Read. Oh yes. Let's talk about Finding His Strength by, let me find this one. Finding His Strength is by Maisha Stone. So this is the second book in the Dirty Heroes collection, which I started because Brianna Hale wrote the first one, and I really like that one. This one is a Hercules and Meg retelling, and it is like mafia-esque, and it's arranged marriage because the beginning of the story is our hero having sex with the heroine's cousin and murdering her as he comes, right? So he murders her during her climax, and he says, I'm so generous because I let this woman die mid-climax, which means her last feelings were of ecstasy. Now, we find out as it goes, like, because this is meant to be shocking, and it's meant to, you know, kind of make you hate this, not kind of be like, oh, the fuck is this guy? And we find out that he actually killed her because she had betrayed his family and her family, and he kills her so that her uncle didn't have to do it. So it's kind of like she was going to be murdered anyway, and he saved her from being tortured, and instead she got to die during pleasure, and oh, I'm just such a, you know, kind-hearted villain. So then, to repay him and to fix the damage between their families, Meg, they're not called this, but I'm just calling them Meg and Hercules because I don't care, is given to him. And she's very resistant to this, and the night before their wedding, he rapes her. And then when he catches her, because he needs an heir, because he needs to make his father happy. And remember, this is supposed to vaguely represent Hercules and Megara. So he is the bastard son of his father, or like the son of his father's like first wife or mistress, I don't know. And so he has like a stepmom who's like Hera, right? And he wants to have an heir so that his father will be proud of him. So he rapes Meg, and he tells her that she can't do anything to prevent pregnancy. And her cousins, who are the older brothers of her cousin who was killed, they sneak her birth control because they're like, we have a plan to kill him if you can just hold off getting pregnant until we kill him. So she's too scared to take this birth control, but she keeps it, which I'm like, that's a fucking mistake. But also, so he had raped her on their wedding night, and she uses a douche kit. Wow, I'm just using all the words. I'm going to get demonetized for this so bad. She uses a douche kit, and he finds it, which I'm like, you dumb person. And so he brings her downstairs because his family owns... Man, I'm getting too deep into this. But basically, he takes her to this room where there is this, like, breeding table. And he says, if you ever do anything to prevent my seed from taking hold in you, I will bring you down into this room, tie you to this table, and keep you here until you're pregnant. So that threat is on the table. So this woman has no bodily autonomy, no reproductive rights. And I'm not even someone, like, I obviously think that is important. I'm a feminist. It's not something I, like, tote about. And the types of books that I read don't always promote that. Like, I understand this, okay? Like, I enjoy a dark book. I enjoy a hero who's twisted. And I don't mind it. But the levels to which this guy went were disturbing. And then Meg basically decides, like, I'm just going to go with it. Because she doesn't want to end up chained to a table in the basement until she's pregnant. I've read a lot of twisted books. I've read captive books. I've read arranged marriages. I've read forced marriage. I've read all of it, okay? And I love some of it. But there's always got to be this part of the hero that I see, either because we see it from his POV or because the heroine sees it in him, that he's doing those things to her because he loves her or has the potential to love her. So that's how I say it. Like, I think I use this as an example all the time because it's the darkest book to this day that, like, I've read. And that's the Twist Me trilogy by Anna Zayres, where Julian kidnaps this woman and takes her to his private island and teaches her all the ways of sex and, like, keeps her forever and never lets her go. And the thing that makes it different is in his mind, he's going to take the best care of her, and he loves her, and he will make her love him. That's still fucked up. I know that. I know that's not healthy. I know that's fine. But when we're talking in like a romance turn of things, or in a sexy story turn of things, that can be a fantasy where this guy is taking you because he loves you so much. Like, it's that stalker fantasy. It's not healthy. I know. But the thing with this one was just, it was so many levels past the line of the shore. Like, we're lost in the fucking Atlantic. Like, there's no hope here. The fact that they try to redeem him, because this is a short book. This whole series, they're short. I just can't, there's no one that I can recommend this to. Like, I can't. It's so fucking disturbing to me. That damn breeding table. And then, you know, that Chekhov's breeding table, it gets used. And there's a point where he finds that birth control, which we know, like, you know. And I'm terrified for her because I know he'll fucking do it. So they've been together for a while, and they've been trying to get pregnant, and she's okay with that at this point. Like, she knows. She's like, well, maybe he'll love me more once we have a baby. Maybe I'll love the baby, and it'll be okay. But she's having problems. Like, they're having problems. It's only been, like, I think it's only her, like, second cycle that they've been together. But he finds the birth control that she fucking kept. Like, she kept. And so he doesn't believe her that she didn't have it because it was her cousin's birth control, so there's some pills missing. So he thinks she's been taking it. And so he ties her to that table. And then he has a final confrontation with his dad and realizes that his dad's never going to accept him. And why would he want to perpetuate why would he want to perpetuate this family that's so toxic? Why did he do this to Meg? And then he runs back down to the room and unties her, and he's like, did I ruin it? Did I ruin us? And I'm like, fucker, we were never okay. Like, this was never working, okay? It was never working. So I ranted. That's one of the ones that I am actually ranting about. And again, I'm not hating on the author because I like books like this book. But this one was too many levels into me. My friend Steph, I got her to read this book as well because I just needed someone to share my pain. And my other friends I told about it, they skipped this one in the series. And this series is twisted. And some of them are fun. Like, twisted is fun sometimes. But the breeding table and the, like, vicious rape. Like, it wasn't even... Okay, that's the thing, too. I've read some Captor Captives where there is a non-consensual sex scene. And it's messed up because the hero will make her like it. Or her body like it. That is still rape. Even if you orgasm, it is still a rape, ladies. It is. You can't control physiological responses. But Hercules just rapes her pretty brutally. But then she's in love with him later. So, yeah, it hurts. It hurts me. And also, he uses BDSM in some ways, and it's always like an instant hate when you misuse BDSM for me. Because I think that BDSM is so special in how it can heal pain while giving pain and give people, like, control that they need. And when it's misused, when it's honest to God used only for punishment, I'm like, out. I'm out. So, okay, let's switch it up and talk about a fantasy, and that is The Stone Sky by N.K. Jemisin. This, I was so sad it didn't work for me. And I know this is, like, completely a personal thing because I did this in a buddy read. I read this with my friend Murphy and my friend Joe, and Murphy really liked it. Joe didn't like it as much. But I loved the first two books in this trilogy. I thought the storytelling technique was amazing. I thought the story that it was telling and the themes were just like my brain just couldn't handle how many layers it was. And then we got to The Stone Sky and just, I don't want to spoil this series at all because there's way more going on than just being a romance. I'm pretty liberal with how I spoil romances because, like, the people are going to end up together in the end, you know. But with this trilogy, I think a lot of people will get a lot out of it, and it's amazing. And it's N.K. Jemisin. I want to read other books by her, but I'm also scared because this series, the way that it ended, just hurt me too much. So that's really it with this one, is I'm a wimp. And that's why, again, I'm calling this video books that were a miss for me, because some of these I think will be fine for you and you will love it. But this was too much for me and it hurt me, and that's why it's on here. But it's a good series. It is, but it hurt. All right, let's continue with this one. I don't have too much more to say about. I did a whole video about it. I'll link it if you want to watch it. I tried not to have my hopes be high, and that was foolish of me to let them get so high, but I did, and I just didn't. I wanted you to either show me Snow spiraling, or I wanted to see different characters than this, or from a different POV than his. Because if we were watching the things he was doing from someone else's point of view, I would have liked it more. This didn't work for me. Enough said. I'm not going to harp on that one. Then, let me see. Then, this one as well, I just read this last week. This is a book from this month. This is Bringing Down the Duke. This, again, I have a lot of similar feelings that I did about Dangerous Alliance. This is a mainstream historical romance. This is really a women's fiction. It's dealing a lot with suffrage. It's dealing with class differentiation. And then there is a love story between the Duke and this commoner. And it has a lot of tropes that I don't appreciate. I talk more about this in my wrap up from last week, which I'll also link if you want more. I just don't want to rehash it. This is one, again, that the positives for it is I hope that it brings mainstream romance readers more into historical romance. I think that you can find the things that this book is trying to do in other books in a more subtle fashion. Because no matter what you might think, historical romances that have women not have the power can still show women having a lot of power. And in a less bang you over the head with it way than this one does. So I think the issues spoken about are important, but I just wasn't into actually seeing the people, like, I just wasn't into it, and I'm sad. And also the hero does a thing that really annoys me. I talk about it more in my Goodreads review for this, as well as my wrap up. But this, I'm sad because I want to like one of these so that I can say, hey, if you love this, come to me, my children. I'll find you more. And this one just didn't do it for me. Let us see. I'm making a way through my list. Okay, I just have 2 left. So we'll do the final historical romance I have on here, and that is The Duke Buys a Bride. This is book 3 in the Rogue Files by Sophie Jordan, which the first one is While the Duke Was Sleeping. The newest book that came out is The Virgin and the Rogue, both of which I like those books quite a bit, especially the new one that's out. This one is actually about the Duke who was sleeping from While the Duke Was Sleeping, and he's kind of going about a like soul-searching mission after, you know, being in a coma and having his family life kind of be up in the air. And he comes to, after a night of drinking, to see a bride auction. So a bride auction is a real thing. I actually knew about this from a history video that I watched, where because it was, number 1, expensive to get a divorce, and number 2, pretty much impossible for the lower classes to obtain, they had this practice called a bride auction, where if both the husband and wife decided that they no longer wanted to be married, the husband could, quote unquote, sell his bride. And so the person who bought her would become her new husband, and he would be free to marry again. And he would be free of any duties or things paid to her from this purchase. Now, if you look into the history of this, sorry, side note, there's a really cool channel called Things I Learned, or Today in History, or something. I can't remember. The More You Know. I don't know, but I love their channel. It's fabulous. A lot of times the bride was sold for like a penny because it was the action of going through the bride auction. It was rarely ever done out of cruelty or because you're trying to get rid of someone or something like that. Like that wasn't what was happening with this. So, but anyway, this is fiction. There's more going on with this. So we have this girl named Alice who, when she was 15 years old, her father died. And as he was dying, he set up a marriage for her with, I think it's the blacksmith, or I'm not quite sure who it is, but she's married to someone, and she's been married to him for 8 years, but she's mostly been like a housekeeper to him. Well, now he has someone who wants to marry him, and so she has made an agreement with her childhood love that he will buy her, and so she can marry him, and then this guy who's been looking after her for the last 8 years can marry who he wants to marry. And unfortunately, the guy who's supposed to buy her doesn't show up that day. So the Duke of Attenbury, he wakes up after being hungover to see this auction happening and sees that this really unsavory creep is about to buy her. And so he steps in and purchases her, all with the purpose of releasing her or bringing her home, because he doesn't understand this custom of the bride auction. And so she's actually really angry that he buys her, and she's like, I'm not going to sleep with you. I'm not going to be your wife. I was supposed to get bought by my friend. And he's like, well, guess what? He didn't show up, and you were about to get sold to some creep who was going to marry you and rape you and like lock you in his dungeon. So you're welcome. You can come be my servant. I'll pay you a wage. Let me take you to my castle in Scotland where I don't live, and I can just dump her there. And so this is the story of them traveling across the country to get to his home. So there's lots of bed sharing, and there's other things going on, and there's yearning, and there's what are her dreams for her life, and blah. So this was a miss for me, mostly because nothing friggin' happened. Like, I know I just explained a lot, but then we have most of the book is a traveling story. And we have them not sharing their feelings. And we have the hero deciding he loves her on the last page of the book. So that's the main reason for me. And also, I had big expectations for Attenbury because I thought, like, when we are introduced to him in While the Duke Was Sleeping, he's sleeping the whole time. And we learn a lot of things about him from his family and from Struan Mackenzie and from, you know, all those people he interacted with, that he was not a great guy. And I wanted to get to see his character arc. And I feel like he was still not a great guy. And I mean, yes, he does buy her with selfless reasons. However, he's pretty mean to her most of the time. And it's like, why did you do this? And it made me sad because the premise was super interesting to me. I'd heard of the practice before, and I think Sophie Jordan in this series, she chose really unique situations for every couple, and this one just like didn't work for me because she has a pattern of rushing through the happily ever after, and that's just a style, like that's just a way to tell a story, which is fine. It's just not my, I don't want it. And then the last one I want to talk to, I just finished last week as well, and actually did a live show with my friends. It's over on my friend Steph's channel. And that is Insidious by Aletha Romig. So I can't say like anything about this book without spoiling it. Like, even telling you why I don't like it, why it didn't work for me, is spoiling it. But some things that I would want to like warn you about, like, aren't even the things I didn't like, because trigger warnings, like, I don't really need them, but this has trigger warnings for rape, assault, yeah, mostly those ones. And like, the setup of this is this 18-year-old girl is forced into an arranged marriage to save her family. a family who mostly doesn't even deserve to be saved. And we're seeing her in that time period. And then we're seeing her in the present time period where this husband that she was forced to marry, he's dying of cancer. And there are a lot of secrets about this contract she signed when she married him that are coming to light. So that's how I'll share this. Definitely look into this book. You could check out our live show where we talked about it for almost 2 hours. And I shared my really true feelings. But I think, and I shared this in the live show, and this isn't a spoiler. My friend Steph picked this book for me to read. I was happy to read it. It was an interesting reading experience. This is more of a thriller than a romance, I'll tell you that. There are sexy and erotic times in it, but it's not a romance. And that's what I thought it was. That's what I thought it was. And that's my fault because Steph reads romance, and I thought that's what I was getting. And her opinion of the book is different than mine, so there's that too. But I wish that I had gone into it knowing that it was a thriller, because I still would have read it. I was going to read whatever Steph picked for me to read. But I think I would have had a different attitude and maybe not have had such different expectations for it. So, that book messed with my head, that's for sure. So there you go. That was some books that just didn't do it for me this year so far. As you can tell, like, I am almost at 300 books read. And this is 12 or 10 books that didn't do it for me. So if 3% of the books I read don't do it for me, I'm doing pretty good. So yeah, you guys like it when I get a little bit ranty. Hopefully this was good for you. The only one of these that I actively hated was Finding His Strength. Everything else, I would say it's more just like, it didn't do it for me. That one I actively hate, and I don't recommend you read it. Everything else, I think you could still give a try to, and it might work for you. So thank you so much for watching this. I put up new videos 3 to 4 times a week. Make sure you like and subscribe. Leave a comment down below, even if it's just a heart, to tell me you were here. And yeah, I'll see you in the next video. Bye.